Hey everyone, it's Klay Williams and Sandra Bello. We're back for part two of our conversation around what does having an abundant, a prosperous, and a healthy retirement look like? What could it look like? What are reinvention tools that we can support you with, and what we've learned from our journey collectively? And Sandy, I have to say, since our last conversation last week. I have had so much incredible feedback about you in particular,
Wow. Okay.
where folks were like, okay, I know Sandy from the Just Beginning pilot, the follow-up interview, but the time that we had to sort of intimately just delve into your life, into topics, and just free flow, people are feeling like they're intimately more connected to you. And so, what have you been hearing?
Um, what I've gotten from the feedback that I've heard was that, that that I'm doing great, that they're learning a little bit more about who I am, Sandy herself,
Yeah.
not the mother-in-law or the aunt or the friend or just in general learning about me
Mm.
um, a little bit more. Even my cousin that I grew up with, she went back to watch the Just Beginning both twice,
Hmm.
and she says I had to go back to rewatch it. She says because I didn't realize I had missed so much the first time. She says I thought I got it all, but I didn't. She goes, and every time I rewatch it, she says I get something more and I get something new. As a matter of fact, she and I we met for lunch, and she was just asking me a lot of questions. Um, different things, like she goes, I didn't know this about you or that about you. She goes, I thought I knew you. She
Right.
goes, only to find out that I really didn't know you.
Yeah.
And I found that very interesting. I guess when we grow up with somebody, or we live somebody, or we go to school, work, we think we know them, but we only know one view or perspective, or whatever we're present for with that
Yeah.
individual.
Yeah.
So
And it's so true. It harkens back to what we were talking about last week around stress and anxiety, how to redefine that so it's not a lifestyle moving forward into retirement. And you hit the nail right on the head when it comes to titles and it comes to identification. And when you first started off, you were saying that people know you as the mom, as the medical expert. They know you as this or that. And your cousin had to go back to rewatch the film that we did to really understand the nuances of who you are, because we all have these different things where we'll go and we'll say, oh, I know so and so, but we don't ever take the hat off and or the glasses and say, oh, I know so and so, but I know them in this context. I know them through the identification and the layers. And so just right off the back, Sandy, imagine if other people had an opportunity to go through a process like this where they can peel back the layers and they invite their friends, their family into a newer reality, not of just who they are, who they once were, but who are they becoming? How robust could our relationships actually be?
I think it would be absolutely amazing, in an ideal situation, ideal world, that would be as close to, I should say, as perfection as it can get.
Mm.
And I say that
Mm.
because sometimes we don't know what has what we've learned or what's been ingrained in us, either through childhood or through experiences, that causes us then to behave or respond or react to
Right.
certain situations in our life. And somebody may take a, like, I know, I'm sure that if I ask somebody, did I ever do anything that caused you to go, oh, what happened there? And they would say yes. And in that moment they probably say, oh, she's having an off day,
Mm.
and they let it go, but they never understood what it was in that moment, the whys.
Right. Right.
and things like that. So I think that's a lot. And I think also it helps within myself. I found that in peeling back my layers, I'm getting to understand myself better. And then
Mhm.
on the things and the triggers that I have that are not healthy, that serve no purpose,
Mhm.
that do nothing but create stress for me or for my family or my environment in that moment,
Mhm.
I've had to learn, okay, so how do I work on this so this way, you know, I can navigate and be a kinder, more genuine person and stuff like that. Then the advantages of being on that end is that when you see it in someone else, you can be more empathetic and
Yeah.
relax, take a step back and say, okay, this person's going through something right now and it's all about
Mhm.
them. It's not about me. So you can look at them differently and deal with them or give them that time and space that they need.
Mhm. Mhm. My professor from undergrad, Dr. Schmeichel, rest in peace, is one of the most brilliant. I would say he probably wouldn't call himself a theologian, but just religious scholars I've ever met in my life. And he defined what you're talking about, grace. And his definition is grace is an act of unearned goodness. We do nothing to earn it. And so far be it from us to then deny other people grace when there's nothing that we actually do to earn it. It's just something that we receive, one of those free gifts that, God gives us. And so now we're talking about that reinvention, and you have been having your eyes open to brand new things post, your retirement. When it comes to relationships in particular, and we talked a little bit about this last week, how has your relationships changed as you have navigated reinventing yourself in this new chapter of life?
To be totally honest, it's made me be a little bit more. I've always been intuitive
Hmm.
and I've always been able to read people well. But I have to be totally frank, there always has been a little bit of, I guess, judgment in one way,
How
being
so?
a little bit judgmental. Um, I guess because I find myself at times when I was really, how do you call it, going through a lot,
Hmm.
um, thinking, and seeing someone or coming across someone that's going through something. Sometimes in my head, I would be listening and trying to help them out. And when you start listening to the problems that they're discussing, I would say in my head, oh, I says, seriously, this is what's triggering you right now and creating a lot of stress and
Hmm.
um, like get some real problems would be the
Mhm.
other thing that I would hear in the background in my head.
Yeah.
I never verbalized it and I never treated them in that fashion,
Hmm.
but I think also I may have and not realized that I may have been displaying it in the answers or the route or maybe even my tone or delivery when I was advising them on how to go about things.
Hmm.
Because I've been known to, I'm just very matter of factly. So I've even
Right.
been working on that. It's not that I mean, it's not that you're bothering me. It's just like, and maybe it's because of I'm still trying to figure out what it is, if it's my upbringing or the type of work I did. Because when I had to deal with doctors, okay, what's going on with this? Oh, this is what's happening, A, B, C, D, this way to break it down. Okay, how we're going to go from here. So I find myself a lot of times I can be listening and I can be feeling empathetic, but
Hmm.
my delivery and how I'm speaking, okay, so you're saying that this, and this. And sometimes there are some people that can receive it well, and then if we have time we can break it down, and then there are
Yeah.
others that need a little bit more softer touch or
Hmm.
a breakdown, or maybe they're not understanding it and stuff like that.
I want to
So
break that down a little bit more, but you just said a mouthful about the and like it's very like juicy what you said, not only is there a professional identity that one has to think through, there's also that relational identity as well as one is navigating this new chapter. And relational, we're now talking about our significant others, our children, family, cousins, friends, neighbors, and all those things like that. And so you're not just transitioning from a professional identity reshuffle, it's also those relational aspects that are now causing those spiritual, emotional, and mental identity questions and queries to sort of be rethought. And I want you to delve a little bit more into what you were saying about the relation parts before we get into the other aspects of it, because it's just so important.
Um, okay, give me a little bit more to follow there
Yeah. So when
because
you're saying like the relationship part that you had to learn about your delivery and how it's coming across is a little bit more empathetic in your relationships. And you've been working on that a lot more now in your retirement than you were before in your traditional day-to-day career.
okay, so basically it's I've always been very honest. Sometimes a little, maybe for some people they tell me, you're just a little bit too brutally honest, you know.
A little
And I
too
says,
direct.
or a little bit too direct, or you truly call a spade for a spade. I says, but what is there? I'm cutting through all the flowery talk because I'm trying to grasp how can I say this to this person what they need to hear or what they're asking that they need to hear
Right.
and give it to them in a fashion where not only can they receive it but they can digest it, and hopefully it is always with the heart and the intention to help them receive it, internalize it, and then okay, so how can I help you? Or did you just need to hear it, or do you need me to help you get in contact with the things and the resources or the tools so that you can navigate through it?
Hmm.
So I've been told, that was really good advice, but you were like, you just threw it at them. And
Hmm.
so now when I'm sitting and I'm listening to somebody, I'm trying to give them more of my attention and trying to feel where they're at that moment to say, okay, they need to hear this, and then present it in a very, how should I say it, organic, loving way.
Yeah.
And I've had to get honestly work within myself with that,
Hmm.
because there was a time where it just came out, it was
Hmm.
very organic, very natural and stuff like that. But somewhere along the line, I think with work and stuff, I'm not going to say I lost it, but I put it so far aside in a different
Right.
compartment along the way that I had to, because I had to detach emotionally when dealing with certain crises at work. And you don't realize how you lose that a little bit when you're trying to then deal with different situations at home, like with your spouse, with your children, with friends, with family, to keep that part of you flowing and in the forefront, right? So
Yeah.
that you can be that person that you've always been.
It's so interesting you say that. Reminds me of a part of the film, and it's in one of the trailers that was created, where Sharon says, um, I have suppressed so much of myself and I have left it for retirement. I knew at that point as I would be able to deal with it all because you just keep going and going and going and going and going. And she said queries around stuff with her husband, with her children. She just had to keep going for in her profession. And so she goes, I remember she verbatim, there's a lot riding on this retirement. The
Yeah.
person that I have suppressed for years and decades, I'm finally going to be able to feel.
Yes. Yeah. That's beautifully said the way she put it. because
Yeah.
I agree with her 1000%. I used to have a standing joke within friends and families that, as my children got older, they would tell me, "So Sandy, what are you looking?" I says, "Oh, I'll probably," and at that time there were all these messy shows like Jerry Springer,
Hmm.
Sally Jesse Raphael, all these other different shows and stuff. I says, "I know I'm going to be on one of those shows." I says, "And the ones that are going to call me there are going to be my three sons." I says, "And all three of them are going to be lined up and talking about, Ma, you don't realize how you traumatized us. AB, you did this. I says, "I'm prepared for it because I finally got to the point where I realized, wow, you know, I would catch myself. I says, I could have done that a little bit better. And, because I really worked hard on keeping an open line of communication with them. I wanted them to feel safe and free to come to me to talk to me about anything. And I needed them to know that I had their back.
Hmm.
It didn't matter about what. We were going to sit down and we were going to work. There was nothing that could. But then I realized there were times where I, 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 I was a little bit rough. I was,
Yeah.
I was brazen and stuff like that. So I figured, and what can I do at that point? I figured, when it happens, it happens. If it, so I was prepared.
And so, the whole phrase about, we're working with the tools that we have at the time that we have them when we're engaging with different people. What I'm hearing you say, and you and I have talked about this offline, when you've made this transition into retirement, you've had a chance to sit and reflect on things that you did great, things that you wanted to do better. If someone is listening to this and they are now having this come to Jesus moment with themselves, especially reflecting on their past, how do they navigate relationships that are either broken, they have ended because of miscommunication, past behaviors, and people are now in a different light? How does one sort of go back to these relationships, especially in retirement, to maybe create a bridge of healing and conversation?
The first thing that comes to mind is that I had to be totally honest with myself to
Mm,
examine within myself to see what was my role in it,
huh. Huh.
you know?
Yeah.
And sometimes, you have to have a good memory and go back and think about.
But Sandy, is there always someone's role in it when there's a miscommunication, when there's a communication breakdown, or is it either someone else's fault, one or the other?
It can be both. I mean, it could be one or the other.
Uh-huh.
It can be a comedy of, not a comedy, but circumstances,
Yeah.
situations,
Hmm.
right? Somebody could be, if you're dealing with someone that's been known to be a practical joker,
Hmm.
and they do things all the time, or they have a level of being very, how do you call it, being sarcastic, or but just being brutal in a certain way.
Hmm.
And I go to them and I says, "Listen, we're having this party, we're having this dinner." I says, "You need to be on your best behavior, because I says, otherwise I'm going to slap you so hard you're going to see the stars from all the constellations." That, and that person comes, and you're anticipating,
Hmm.
because this is the track record that they have. And I'm
Hmm.
not talking about a year or two. I'm talking about years and years of doing the same thing. So everybody's conditioned. Everybody's looking at this person to see what they're going to come up with.
Hmm.
And their body language displays that this is hypothetical, but that they're going to do something. You turn around and you react to that,
Hmm.
only to find out much later on that that was not where they were going,
Hmm.
that they had actually made a conscious effort to do or do something different. They really wanted to do something nice for you. It's, you have to look at, I'm not saying that you have to, but I just found it necessary for the things that I wanted to get right for me
Mhm.
within my with family or friends and stuff. I had to take a step back to see where that person was in their life,
Yeah.
and you know and then where I was, and how did I respond and I react. Granted, that doesn't mean that every person that I've dealt with, I have individuals that I know there's a whole bunch of red flags.
Mhm. Mhm.
um I tried my best with each situation with them to deal with it the best possible way at that moment in time.
Mhm.
But I also did it consciously. So it was not something where that I had done without thinking. So there's certain relationships and bridges that I burned that I'm okay with it. I burnt the front, the end, and the middle, and I'm okay with it. It's a done deal. Okay, it's finished, and I'm seriously okay with it. And I still look at it and I go, no, I'm still okay with it. Now, for me to get over it, now I forgave them a long time ago, so I could go on with my life,
Mhm.
so I could have peace, and I'm still okay with it. But there's other things that have come along the way that says, you know what, I need to talk to so and so and give this person a call. And even if I can't remember, and I've already done this, like
Yeah.
I've called people and I says, we haven't spoken in a while, this, that, and the other. I says, listen, I just want to take this opportunity that if I ever did or said anything to hurt you, to disrespect you, that I don't remember, that I says, I want to take the opportunity now.
Mm.
I says to apologize, but for you to please then share with me what it was or what it is.
Mhm.
I said, so this way, if there's a possibility of a reconciliation or amending, and then that's the other thing. People have to understand forgiveness and reconciliation is two different things. You can
Mhm.
forgive somebody just to get on with your life. That person doesn't have to be in your life, or you don't have to be in theirs. But with reconciliation, that opens up the opportunity for both people, both parties,
Mhm.
to say, okay, we're going to give this relationship a second chance
Mhm.
and see how we can heal going forward from here.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Why do you think these conversations around forgiveness, around interpersonal healing within yourself, that one-on-one relationship and other people, why is it so paramount in retirement? What happens for individuals where all of a sudden the things that you have just not thought about in decades, it's literally right in your face? And I'm hearing this from so many retirees about this.
I think it's because there's a consciousness level of that, we have X amount of years behind us,
Mm. Mhm.
and and only so many years in front of us. And I
Yeah.
think we also, in our walk, we start saying, you know what, I want to do right or make right, so that when my time comes for my transition, I can be at peace, and or give peace to anyone, not left anything unsaid.
Mhm.
One of the things I realized with my husband's transition, with the service that we had and everything, so many people through social media that came for the wake and at the service, just,
Mm.
and I go back and I read it, talk about the impact that he had on them and in their lives.
Mhm.
And that's wonderful. But I think he could have used a lot of that.
Mm.
He probably he would have benefited just hearing that
while he was living.
while he was living.
Mm.
Because I think it wasn't going to change anything as far as his illness and his disease. But I think also he would have known, wow, I did have a purpose and I made a difference.
Mm.
And sometimes I think we go through life and we think that we've taken that step and that this individual knows or understands. And one of the things I find interesting is that in human nature, somebody can give us a compliment and we receive it and we embrace it, right?
Right.
And but then all you have to do is hear one criticism, and for some reason, that
Mm.
compliment, because it made us feel safe and stuff, it's like we're wired for the negative and to
Mm.
be in fight or flight mode, or
Right.
to figure out what we is. So what we have a tendency of focusing and thinking on is anything that's unpleasant, unkind, that triggers pain or stuff like that.
Mm.
So did he have those that came to him on a regular basis, kept in touch with him and said how much they love him and this, that? Yes. But the all the other stories from the kids and the students, and oh, I remember this, I remember that. If that had been sent to him in a letter or a note or an email, listen, Mr. Bello, I just want to let you know that this is the impact. I think it would have helped him. He would have not been agonizing of the quality of human being he was.
Wow. And you're saying,
I
and
think
go ahead.
as we get into retirement, part of the process I think that would be helpful, not just for the person that's retiring for the healing, but to make sure that we also, as we're trying to heal, those people that, even if you haven't spoken to in 10, 15 years, oh, I remember the time you bought me lunch when I didn't have, call them, let them know, listen, you know what? I still think about it. I remember and I appreciate it,
Yeah.
because it's something that just stays there. I don't think we appreciate or let people know how maybe one small thing, the impact that it had, because they're thinking that they did it and it's gone, and no, it stayed with you
Yeah.
and maybe cause you to do something different for somebody else. And I think that would be a good thing to say, wow, I did this for them and they did this for somebody else, and they can see the ripple effect of an act of kindness, and it may motivate them to do, or just to feel good about themselves. Wow, I didn't think that such a small thing would have such an impact.
Yeah. This leads me back to during our field research. It was one of the individuals who had just entered into retirement that I was interviewing just to understand all the pain points. I wanted to get as much information as possible, as well as the triumphs and the challenges. And after our conversations, just the questions that I was asking him, he went back and started volunteering at the Boys and Girls Club in the city in which he lived in. He went back and
Wow.
started making a different impact with the city municipalities and the local government that he was in. He goes, I have so much more to do. And it was just me asking questions. It was an interview, a give and take. And at the end of it, he was like, thank you so much. And I'm like, thank you so much. I needed to get this information when we're interviewing all these different people. He goes, no, you have no idea. And we have forged a friendship. And he's still out in the community doing all of these different things. And to your point, maybe had we not had that sit down conversation, and it was just a 45-minute to an hour interview where I'm just listening to him. It sparked so much more life and exuberance and excitement in him that it literally led him to action. And that's what I'm hearing you say.
And we don't realize that who we were in our teens, 20s, 30s, 40s, we're different people. Are we the same person? Yes.
Mhm.
But we're different people at different stages. And sometimes we just need to say, oh my God, I can't talk. Because I remember in high school, college, or whatever, or, we went and this person was just hard. Yeah, do some people just stay horrible human beings? Yeah, some do. I can't break that mold. I don't know why, but, you know, all I can do is hope that they change before they take that leap. And some people do, but others do change.
Mm.
And I think, you know, it would be nice just to check in, and if you really know this person, then in a couple of minutes you're going to know whether, okay, I regret making that phone call, but at least I got my answer. I know where I'm at. And or like, wow, this person has really made a difference, or is really working on themselves, or there's really, and you never know, you may think somebody's angry at you and they go, oh no, 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 I was angry at the moment that you told me, but that made me think, that made me say, wow, you know, I needed to reflect upon myself. And then I look within myself and I realized I needed to change, or it caused me to do this. I was so angry at you that I was going to say, I told myself, oh, I'm going to show them. And it just turned out to be better for me. Like,
Yeah.
people, it's, I think we're just like all a process. Like, the mother that my oldest son JJ got is not the same mother that my Nicholas received, and definitely not the same mother
Mm.
that Adam received. I'm a
Mm.
mother to all three, right?
Right.
But I was not the same mother to my first, my second, or my third born.
Wow.
Okay, because when I had my oldest,
Yeah.
I knew nothing about motherhood.
Hmm.
Right? And then I learned a little bit more in the process. So I was a bit of a different, then there's difference in children personalities.
Hmm.
So I think sometimes even with kids, I try to say, oh, but mom loves you more. No, she let you get away with this. They're not talking about or listening or thinking that I may have done something for you because your needs were different. It
Hmm.
wasn't that I didn't want to give it to you. You just didn't have that need at that time, but
Right.
this one did. And that was one of the things that I tried, um, to bring to light when having my sons. Also reminded them, you're brothers, but you're different. You're gonna have different styles of taste in clothing, music, people that you connect with. I says,
Yeah.
whatever you do, I need you to respect it, because at the end of the day, and I would tell them, as I get older, I says, I need to know that the three of you will come together and still love one another
Hmm.
and still be there for one another.
Hmm. Hmm.
So that was something else that was always like sitting in the back of my head.
And
Um,
and that's a great example as it relates to each version of ourselves is completely different from decade to decade, year to year, month to month. And so at this point in life, as you're reflecting back on past relationships around communication breakdowns or healing that may need to take place, that's a great example of literally saying that person may not be the version of who you experienced back in, way back then, and to open yourself up to the possibility that we don't need to assume someone is exactly who they once were if we're open to a conversation with that person potentially.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. And one of the points that we were talking about last week around the stressors around anxiety and it as a lifestyle, help came up in some of the comments that I was getting. And they kept saying, it seems like Sandy's a good person. It's a great example of a person who knows how to ask for help during her transition, because we talked a lot about what happened during our coaching process. How important do you think this leg of the journey is, in particular, to identify your wants and your needs and the areas that you need to ask for help in?
Okay, so let me clarify one thing first,
Oh.
that while that was a beautiful compliment, I need to be totally transparent. And so, one of the things I was not great at in my life
This is
was
good.
asking for help. That has never been my strong suit, ever. Okay. So during childhood, I was the firstborn. I was responsible for a brother and a sister. I was the oldest of all the girls from cousins and stuff like that.
More
So they,
identities.
so more identity. Even with my cousins, like we laughed and we would talk about. She goes, "Yeah, I remember Titi, saying, well, go, let's go talk to Sandra and see what she says about this." Like there was that pressure being the first and the oldest, and I was a rule follower. You
Mhm.
know, did I get into a lot of trouble for questioning certain things that did? Yeah, I did.
Mhm.
But I didn't question it in the fashion by rebelling and stuff. I just questioned it. And
Mhm.
I was very clear on talking out, but why? Explain to me, because this doesn't make any sense. You're asking me to do this and then, and was there additional punishment for not being quiet and not listening to the elders? Yeah, so
Yeah.
you got a price to pay, but there is a level of stress in that. So I learned very quickly that even in those situations, I was left alone to handle, to learn how to do things independently or by myself.
Oh,
Okay.
huh. Yeah.
All right. So that carried into different schools. So in public school, we had one dynamic, and I remember being in school, going from public school to Catholic school, and the dynamic was that if we were never, if you needed assistance, it was one thing, but needing help, like I would have difficulty, like I asked you earlier, just give me a little bit of a breakdown on this,
Right.
because sometimes I'll hear a question and my brain goes off into two different directions. Now, do they mean this or do they mean this? Because there's two possible answers, right?
Yeah.
So sometimes even within the teachers, and then you face the embarrassment of the kids making fun of you. It was like, well, what do you mean by this? What do you think I mean? The question is, what is dun dun dun
Um,
dun dun? But if there was no clarification, then it was like, what are you're not smart enough, you're dumb enough, or stuff. So it left me open to have to figure out things on my own independently, or I knew that then the price I was going to have to be paid was either to be called stupid, dumb, or to be ridiculed,
so
right?
let's just stop, pause right there. So, so good. The identification factor, or the identity that you had as a young kid, being the eldest meant you had to have a level of independence and a level of responsibility, being responsible for other people that weren't your children, but it was just the expectation.
Mm-hmm.
And then it became the pattern, not only in school, because I am the eldest, because I am the one that people go to. I don't need to ask for help. And then also, a byproduct of that is if you're asking for help in a classroom setting, kids would tease you based off of you literally needing just clarification or support. And so you grew up and ruminated in that, and it became a pattern and a pathology for most of your life.
Yep. Now add to that, you start going into the volunteer field. Once I got into high school, I went to vocational high school. The mentality at that time, we're talking about 1970, 71, 72. I remember going doing volunteer work, trying to learn how to work labs and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And these were adults that were in the medical field that were supposed to be training me how to dye slides because I was supposed to help them. I was trying to learn a trade, a skill.
Hmm.
And I remember hearing, "Oh, honey, you're going to have to do a little bit, well, what do you know? Do you know this?" And I would tell them what I had learned academically through the program. but I had never done this before and stuff like that. Well, if you're, and I remember, I was from the era that by high school, you either were going to school, moving out of your house, or getting a job. Okay.
Right.
So you're trying to get skills so that you can go out there into the workplace. So they says, oh no, you're going to have to do a little bit better than that because you're going to have to learn to fake it until you make it. And I'm like, learn
Mm,
to fake what to make what?
mm,
So now they add that into the mix that even if you weren't sure if you knew how to do the job, it was kind of like expected. You either had to know it, learn it, educate yourself.
yeah.
And we're talking still about an era where there was no computers and stuff like that.
Right.
So where am I going to get the knowledge and the skills to have to do this?
If I'm not getting from you, the person who's in charge, the person who's responsible for my learning.
And then some of them were that didn't mind teaching. It was real quick. Okay, this is it. You
Yeah.
got to do this, 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 this. That's where I also added my visual skills paid off and my memory because I had to watch them and I had to stay focused to see, okay, you're going to pick up this thing and we're going to do this is step 2, this is step 3. And I would put it down on memory. Then I would write it down in a fashion so that I had notes for myself
Right.
to say when I went back. And I had to learn to be extremely methodical
Mm,
because otherwise I would go into like a different phase of stress. And these are all the things that we don't realize we pick up in the process of trying to grow, of trying to learn, of trying to adapt, trying to fit in,
yeah.
that then we start carrying into
And
that carries into our lives.
and adapting in a way where a basic question for learning so that you could do a better job, it wasn't accepted. You had to adapt to how you could best get the information.
Correct.
And that wasn't by just raising your hand and saying,
No,
wow. And so, how then, if you're going through your entire life, and now we're still talking about adolescence and then
right.
making our way up into adulthood, for the person who complimented you on getting the help that you would need during this critical transition and retirement, how did you get there?
With your program.
Okay, okay, but
All of that just to say I was a hot mess, couldn't ask for help until I started doing Just Beginning because I had to learn that it was okay. Be given that safe space to understand it. It was okay. And the wording of how can you support me in this meant a lot to me because it didn't sound like I was asking for help, so to speak. Like
mm,
I didn't have to use that help word. I didn't have to tell my son or my husband, I need your help in this. What I was asking was to see if there was any way they could support me. For me, that was a big deal because that meant that I was leaving it open to them not to feel like there was one specific thing. They would have to think about, well, you know what? I can. Would this be good enough? Or would this, is this what you
yeah.
need and stuff? So
This
it,
is what I need. Is that something you can support?
right,
And so then let's talk about that then. If someone, especially your era, baby boomers in general, we don't want to paint a broad brush, but one thing we definitely know from research and from the conversations that we've been engaging is it's a generation that has been so self-sufficient because of all the reasons that you laid out and a whole lot more, where asking for help has been a issue, for this generation in particular. And so I imagine as a big transition is taking place, is even harder. What is the distinction then? Because you alluded to it. Asking for support versus help. Is there a distinction for you? Because I'm just wondering if we give people the language to get the support that they need, could that be critical in them advancing towards getting the support they need for an activity, for a higher sense of purpose, for basic questions, as well as living the life that they want to live?
For I had to think about that a moment, because
Sure.
while for me it gave me an easier out in language how to use it. I think the distinction was that I'm in helping. For me, I'm not asking you to do it for me. I'm not asking you to do the actual task.
Mm-hmm.
For me, the help that I needed and required at the time was needing to know that I wasn't alone.
Mm. Yeah,
If that
it
makes
does.
any
Yeah, keep
sense.
going. Keep going. Yeah.
That I wasn't by myself. I've had to live so long independently alone, being either the leader or the person taking the lead, or in a position that when we were at a room or dinner, we had to figure something out. Everybody would turn around and just look at me. So, do you have any ideas how we're going to handle this? When you get thrown in that situation,
Mm.
and I think we've all been in those places where we've been at a meeting or a dinner or a family function, or there's unfortunately a death in the family, and somebody finds themselves, well, I've never had to handle. Who do we have that might have some knowledge and stuff? There's always that one person, that one family member that
Right.
people go to, either to get the family history or to find out, listen, how did we get here about this or whatever. There's usually one person. Being that person for so long,
Mm.
to be that support system is, and never being able to say, I need help for something, because also help was associated with either weakness,
Mm-hmm.
okay? A level of weakness, like, what do you mean you can't do this by yourself? You need to be prepared. Like, even with my father, his mentality, because I had been sick as a child, there was certain things I learned to do. It was always in his mind was that I want to prepare you in the event that you don't get married, you don't have a husband, you don't have son, you can do this by yourself.
Mm.
So you don't have to count on anybody.
Yeah.
So
Another identity layer, another pattern and pathology that would define a lot of your preconceived notions around getting the support you need versus help.
right. So for me, the word help meant that, oh, you need me to help you with that? What do you need me to do? All right. Normally, that's been my experience what people ask.
Yeah. And I love, Sandy, how it's such a very clear distinction, and it helps ground the word help versus support. And when you're talking about the support, can you support me so that I'm not alone in this? And I think that is going to be so powerful for so many people, if it's even support in painting a room, support and a networking opportunity to go to this retreat center, a support and a letter of recommendation. What people are literally saying, based off of what you're sharing with us, so that I don't have to do it alone, so I
Yeah.
don't feel alone.
And so that I don't feel alone.
Yeah.
Like, even with
Oh, so
painting,
good.
even when people think about, like, okay, how can you support me painting a room? Like, for example, well, me physically, I can't help you paint the room, but guess what? I may know of somebody that might be willing to assist, and we can go on there, and it may be just of navigating, getting information.
Mhm.
um Listen, I can't do this for you, physically, but I know somebody that can. All, it opens you up to different tools, resources, things that you probably wouldn't even think. I go, oh wow, I never thought of that, and that's a good idea, or something like that. I never looked at it that way. It's and for me, that was the big difference. Like using that word support, because for me, um, the association of help was the fact of what can I do when I really didn't need them to do anything. It was because for me, I felt like I was by myself and alone struggling with stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
We first started this conversation around looking back in our past, especially people who are making a huge transition into retirement around reconciliation, forgiveness, as well as not making assumptions about who people are. And then we navigated towards getting the help, the support that we need, and the distinctions between help and support. One of the things that is, I think, a huge reflective moment is having qualifiers and descriptors for who the baby boomer generation has been assimilated to be historically. And a part of those patterns and things that you were taught, and I hear this over and over again, I was the eldest, I was the first. This is just how it was. You couldn't do this. There was no room for you to have an opinion. You were, to be seen and not heard, and all those things like that. How do we get to a place, especially in this reflection period, where we can take an objective look back at all of the descriptors that have defined your generation and the great things, but also some of the things that are very difficult as it relates to our family programming and the way in which we were raised that no longer serves us.
I think the first word that comes to mind is talking about it, communication.
Hmm.
I think there's very little, I think there's very little speaking from one generation to another, like for them to understand, well, why you are the way you are. So, you know, I was always say, listen, this is the way I was raised. That's all we knew at that time. And it may
Mm.
not sense. And it was good in this manner, but in this manner, I can see how it created obstacles or the downside of it. So
Mm.
everything, there's a lot of things that I learned that was like a double-edged sword, right?
Right, right.
So respecting the elders, you know, walking into a room and saying hello to everybody, and greeting them, and and culturally there's different things like Spanish households. You go in, you go started with the eldest, the older person, the elder in the room, and you ask them for a blessing, a bendición, and different things like that. We all have
Hmm.
our customs and stuff like that. Well, I think that's great, and I still like the fact that my sons there, and I see my grandkids still going to family functions, still following. But at the same time, we need to incorporate that we also need to empower them and let them know that it's okay to come and talk to us and question things. Maybe not question that person that's there, but they need to know that they have a person or someone that's safe to go. Listen, so and so mentioned this and this to me, and you know, I didn't want to be disrespectful to them, but I think it's all about communication. I
Yeah.
think we need to sift through and tease out everything that we've learned either religiously, culturally,
Mm.
or due to our demographics, living environment, and stuff like that. I mean, it's work, but
That part.
it needs to be done.
Yeah. In the identity reshuffle exercise that is in the trainer program, one of the trainees asked me, there are so many identification factors that you have here. I feel like it's just way too much. And then I responded to her and I said, I think it's way too less. It's way less than what's actually needed. And this is a great example of how we don't even recognize or even know how much identification factors we take on from our childhood all the way up to each graduation of life, to each transition of life, to each ending of life. And it's in these moments where we have the opportunity, we invite ourselves and gives us permission without the judgment to reflect on these identification factors and to then figure out what do we want and what we don't want to carry on anymore, that the healing can take place and it could be a much more fruitful retirement or next life chapter. And when we say retirement, we're using the word retirement because it's colloquially known in the world. But we're talking about reinvention. We're talking about
Correct.
really next life chapter steps to make this as vibrant as one possibly can. And I think you hit the nail right on the head where it is a lot of work, but it's needed.
It's needed required because I don't think, or at least I have not heard people talking about all the things from the time that we enter, all where we're learning from, where we're receiving all
Yes.
these misinformation. Definitely, I think it's demographically, it depends. It's also economically, depending on what kind of work our parents did, where their incomes and stuff like that. It's religious factors are in there. It's
Yeah.
cultural factors. It's also, you need to stop and think where your parents were, as my parents were at, in their education. Like,
Yeah.
for example, my mother actually finished junior high school.
Mm.
All right, and she could always do math in her head like a whiz. She was the human calculator in the house. She could sit there and you could run some numbers off, and she could figure that out in her head with a no brainer. My dad was great with a pencil and paper. But I don't think, I was thinking about that the other day. I don't think my father went to school after the seventh grade
Mm.
because he was too busy working on the farm. And though he did go and served in the military, but yet his he spoke perfect English, Spanish, read, wrote, everything. The newspaper and stuff, very involved in all the different things, the news, politics, medicine, different things like that. Real smart, but he didn't have that high school diploma or junior high school diploma. And so you have to think about that. So they want better for their kids, so they push you on
Mhm.
to do a little bit more. Then you have to think about where you lived and the schooling and the district, and also, not for nothing, where we were born during this time of where our country was at. Like,
Complete different political, social
you know
understanding. Yeah, the context is different.
I mean, it's terrible because I, I remember when my mother and my dad were talking about when there was first talk about a welfare program. It's weird because I remember that, because I remember them having a discussion in the kitchen over coffee, and my mother says, "I don't think that's a good idea." My father was like, "Oh, but it'll help certain people just to get them off their feet." My mom, she was funny. She goes, "No." She goes, "I don't think so." She goes, "I think they're going to try to use that and her mentality." She
Mhm.
says, from what she understands it, and I don't know where she got all her information from, if it was just from the newspaper. She goes, no. She goes, they're going to try to use that to keep us. Um, she didn't use the word prisoner or suppressed. She used another word in Spanish that I guess could be translated to keep us oppressed or not being able
Mm-hmm.
to excel, right?
Right.
So it was interesting because she goes, and the thing is, she goes, I'm not against it for people that actually need it, that they need it for short term.
Right.
But she expressed two fears: people becoming dependent on it and staying on it, and it being used as a form to keep people oppressed. So when her and my dad got divorced, it was my mom, myself, and my sister. All three of us were working. My sister made the suggestion of going to get food stamps to help bridge the stuff
Mm-hmm.
and possibly taking Wall for a short term. Well, my mother had a fit and a half.
Mm.
She said, absolutely not.
Hmm.
She says, we're going to do it ourselves. We're going to do it like this. She goes, and we're going to be just fine.
Mm-hmm.
And we did. And was it a struggle? Yeah, it
Mm-hmm.
was. It was hard. It was a struggle.
Yeah.
But it was the three of us. And when I talk about that, we started from scratch with an apartment where we had no tables, no chairs. We had nothing.
Mm-hmm.
It was like,
That was it. Nothing.
that was
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
So my mother had to leave her residence because my father had become an alcoholic
Mm-hmm.
and he was increasingly getting violent.
Mm-hmm.
She left for her safety and for ours.
Mm-hmm.
So we had to leave everything behind,
Yeah.
everything, and there was no, at that time that we knew of, programs for domestic violence or for
Mm-hmm.
housing or for stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
So for a short time, we stayed with an uncle and an aunt, but it had to be short term because my mother was just that person.
Right.
She didn't want to inconvenience anybody.
Mm-hmm.
So we were working, we were putting money together between our three paychecks. And my sister and I were both still in high school.
Wow.
Okay. We were in high school.
And still working,
So we had to go to school
of course.
and then we had to work.
Mm-hmm.
And all the money went to her for her to budget and figure everything out.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how we pulled it off.
Yeah. And think about this is why this is so important. Right then and there, those are at least 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 identity factors that you had to take on and that have followed you throughout the rest of your life and that you have been working through to support you in, again, releasing what you don't want to carry on, taking the things that have been very helpful into this next chapter. And next week, I really want us to talk about the benefits of being able to look around like these identification factors that we have been living with for such a long period of time. What does it produce on the other side? Because if I'm listening to this and I'm thinking I have worked all my entire life, why in the world would I want to take all this additional time to figure out what my life was? It just was what it was. I need to just go on. But what we're seeing and what we know, people are having a much more vibrant, purposeful, meaningful next life chapter when this crucial part is actually dissected and it's assessed in a non-judgmental way. Would you agree with that?
I would agree. And I think subliminally, I think we reach a point where, at least for me, it was like, okay, now it's time for me to pull myself together, heal myself. You
Hmm.
know,
Hmm.
it's kind of like getting your life in order or in place because then you become aware of how far, at least I've known a lot of people talking about, boy, I'm definitely not the person I was when I started. And now, you realize your identity is locked into your job or your position, your title. Oh, and then you become, okay, so who am I now?
Yeah.
Or getting reacquainted with that part of you that you put on the shelf.
Mm.
And how do you take care of that person, heal the inner child, and just get to the point where you feel comfortable and at home in your own skin.
Ooh. Ooh, that's good. Home within.
Yep.
Home within. I think what I would really love to do in our next conversation is to give the people even more concrete tools on how to do that, home within yourself, and then why it's actually important and necessary towards navigating that successful next life chapter. Sandy, I just need to sit back and give you the microphone and let you teach.
Oh, I don't
Yeah.
know about that.
Yes, no, yeah. This is just this is so enlightening, and every aha moment that I'm getting and at 40 in my 40s, I know that people who are navigating this huge transition, baby boomer, Gen X, whatever the case may be, or not, multi-generational communities are asking themselves some of the questions that they probably wish they would have known early on. But here's the more important query, what can I do about it right now? And that's what you are giving us permission to do through your wisdom and going through this process.
And I think it's, and like I said, it always goes back to communication. What we're willing to, my thing is this: if I can help one person or get one person to listen to this and go, oh, and get something together in their life that gives them more peace, makes them happier, healthier, or bridge a gap with children, spouse, parents, and stuff, you know, it's, I would be grateful for that.
And we're going to get into that too. I don't want to go on too much of a tangent, but the number one article last year that was published in the New Yorker are children divorcing their parents. So we're looking at the baby boomer generation and their kids. It was the number one read article that the New Yorker magazine published. And there's so much to unpack from there. And we're going to do that in a few weeks. But
Okay.
just when you were talking about the relationship piece and the children, I was floored when I saw that and looked at the stats, and we'll talk about that. Sandy, where can people engage you who want to follow you and want to just stay connected with all of your wisdom and all the great things that you have going on in your life?
Uh, with through Just Beginning, what is it? S Bello 29
What's
on
what's your
Instagram.
Instagram? What's
S Bello 829 on Instagram. Um, through Just Beginning.
Yeah.
I'm here if there's questions, or if they want to ask a question or want me to address a question or something, they can send it to you, send it to me, and that's what we're here for.
All right, folks. So listen, we'll have all of our information in the show notes. Of course, you can learn more about Sandy at sbalo829 at IG. You can follow the Just Beginning Project at justbeginning.info, and I'm Plan A with Klay on all of my social media handles. I'm going to talk about my books too in the following few conversations because it's really important to what we're talking about. There is only Plan A, and so Plan A with Klay is my social media handle. But if you have any comments, of course, this is on YouTube. Write your questions, send your comments in YouTube, and we'll be sure to address it in our next conversation. Thank you so much, everybody. We'll talk to you soon. Peace.
Bye.